Hello, everybody. Welcome to Current World Problems. We're starting a new unit today, one that I think is very interesting and is very timely. And it's always timely because we're talking about globalization and inequality. So, what are these two things and how are they interconnected? That's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. What actually is globalization and what is inequality? So, let's just get right into it. Globalization, what is it? A process of rapid economic and cultural integration among countries. Just means that countries all across the world are more closely aligned than ever before, just in terms of how much ideas get spread, how much cultural things and exports get spread, things even like food and other things like products and ideas. All these things are getting spread from country to country in a way that had never been done before. And we're going to be talking about the positives and the negatives of that. So it's driven by global trade and technological advances. It also makes the world more accessible to everybody. So there's times now where you can talk to somebody across the world in ways that you couldn't have dreamed of back in the past. The fact that you can actually have a relationship or a friendship with somebody on the other side of the world was a fantasy before, but it's the reality now for millions of people across the world. And this also leads to international standards, not just international standards in money and what we trade and things like that, but just in terms of what ideas are considered acceptable. For example, now the idea of democracy and, human rights are something that a lot of people just accept on its own. But in the past, those sorts of things would have never been, accepted worldwide. But globalization has made it so a lot of these ideas have spread across the world. Where did democracy begin? I was talking about this earlier to some of my students, but if we think about it, it started in just one place. It started in ancient Greece, but has spread from there to all sorts of different cultures and places around the world. Now to the Americas, North and South America, and places like India. It's places originally where the people in Greece probably had no idea it even existed, but now they have spread across the globe. And that's globalization in action. Here are some examples of globalization. I have McDonald's there, I have K-pop group, and I've got a giant shipping container ship, a cargo ship. And those are all kind of examples of globalization. So something like watching a Swedish YouTuber, that's an example of globalization. The fact that you can see somebody in another country, that used to be impossible. You couldn't do that. No screens, no way of having that technology available. Listening to a Korean pop song in a different language than maybe this would have also been very, very strange just 50 years ago. Listening to music in a language that you don't normally speak. And this is something, I do. I listen to some Brazilian music and Japanese music and, all sorts of lyrics that I don't quite understand, but I still enjoy the music. This is something to where, I wouldn't have had that. I wouldn't have ever even heard of those songs just even 50 years ago. Playing video games made in Japan or another country, like in places like Eastern Europe and all sorts of things. These are all, it's like a global kind of community that exists just around playing video games. And even something like following the beliefs of a Jewish rabbi from maybe a small corner of the Middle East, which is what happened with Christianity. This would be an example of globalization. Ideas that started in one place spreading around the world. So these are all examples of globalization in action. What types of globalization is there? There's economic, social, and political. Economic globalization means international trade. Goods between countries are easy to obtain. Something goes on a shipping container in China, gets put on a ship. That container goes to maybe some place like Oakland or Seattle or Long Beach, gets put on a train. That same container is on a train, then gets put onto a truck somewhere, and then that truck goes to your local store, and now you have things that were made thousands of miles away in your local store. And that's something to where that is economic globalization in a nutshell, where it's stuff that came from very far away and is easily obtainable and actually cheaper than goods made in your local community. Then there's social globalization. That's information and cultural norms passed between people of different countries. So this is just what I was talking about with information and ideas being translated to different cultures across the world. And finally, there's political globalization too. That's basically the amount of political cooperation that exists between countries, specifically cooperation, not antagonism. It's one of those things where we can agree with other countries on what our goals are, and that would be an example of globalization. So let's go through a history of globalization really quickly, and then your homework assignment will be coming up next. So let's just go, I kind of put 1800 for the Industrial Revolution. That's a bit, I don't know. You could start the Industrial Revolution sooner, in maybe even the 1740s through the 1760s, somewhere in there. With a lot of these historical events that happened, it's hard to really nail down when they started and when they ended, but it really kicks up into high gear during the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution. This is where you have things like steamships, and you have automation of different industries happening, especially like textiles and things like that, things that hadn't happened before. 1900 through 1940, you have the rise of things like automobiles and airplanes. These are also brand new inventions that totally changed transportation and human societies in general. The fact that we could get places much faster through the air opened up a whole wide world of possibilities. Then we had things like the first digital computer. These used to take up a whole room, and they're probably less powerful than, my watch. But it's impressive what they were able to do with the technology that they had. We have in 1948, we have things like international trade agreements between countries. In the 1960s through 70s, we have those shipping containers I was talking about now, the ones that could go from a ship to a train to a truck. That was an important step in, revolutionizing world trade. The fact that we could have the same containers that would fit on all of those different ways of transporting them. Then we have the introduction of the first personal computers in about 1977. And then finally, one of the most important things that's happened in terms of opening up global communication is the invention of the internet. More importantly, the World Wide Web specifically, I should say. Not importantly, but the internet as it exists is only accessible through what we call the World Wide Web. I hope to talk about this in more detail later because it's something that is totally integral to our whole world today, but is somewhat relatively recent. It's only 30 years old. So despite it only being 30 years old, the World Wide Web has completely changed the entire world in a way that no other technology really has in as fast of a time as it has. Even something like the airplane, which was amazing and really did change the world, it didn't change it to the same extent that the internet has changed almost every aspect of, human society. And then finally I put down 2007, the first smartphones. And this has also been a revolution. The fact that you can have a computer in your pocket, basically, and that you're tied to it at all times. Some of these things people would say is a gift, and others would say it's a curse. And there's a lot of truth to both of those opinions. That despite us having this truly global connected world, it's amazing in the way that our grandparents and great-grandparents and ancestors couldn't imagine, but it also leads to all sorts of problems across the world. So we're going to be talking about the amazing parts of it and, of course, the problematic parts. And then here's your assignment. I'm going to have you guys look up American businesses and how they operate in another country. You're going to be answering the following questions. Where was this business founded in America? What country other than the USA have they found the most success? And number 3, what about that country's culture has made the business successful there? Then you're going to do the opposite. You're going to find a company that was founded outside of the United States and one that operates in this country, in the United States of America. And I'm going to ask you, which country was that company founded? Why did they expand to America? And why have Americans purchased this company's products? So you're going to be answering all those questions and turning it into me. And I will see you guys on Wednesday as we talk more about globalization, more about global trade, and eventually we are going to be talking about inequality and all the problems that brings. So tune in next time. I'll see you then. Bye.